2009, a group of researchers put a salmon in an fMRI scanner. The salmon was dead. It had been bought at a fish market that morning. They showed it photographs of people in social situations and asked it in writing to determine what emotion the person was experiencing. This might sound odd, but hear me out. Then they asked and analyzed. Then they actually analyzed the scan. The way a lot of papers were actually being analyzed at that time, and they found significant activation in salmon's brain cavities, and in its spinal column. It was a deliberate demonstration, and the point was this: an fMRI scan has something like 100,000 voxels in it. If you run a separate statistical test at every voxel and call anything below 0.05 significant, then by definition you expect around 5,000 false positives. Just from chance, in a dead fish. They got a poster of it, and eventually an IG Nobel Prize, and a field tightened up its standards considerably. Like a dead fish was enough to know we're doing it wrong. So today, how to make a claim from data and how not to fool yourself while doing it, which is the same skill, believe me. Okay, 2 conditions. Let's say with our signal generator. 2 conditions as before. We have 2 conditions. Condition A has a stronger oscillation on average than condition B, but every trial draws its own amplitude at random, so the 2 groups overlap heavily. And that's the purpose, as I explained, to generate some type of data that we know the correct way to answer the question, so we can test it to see if our methodology is working or not. That overlap is deliberate, as explained, and it's the unless situation. Real conditions overlap. If your 2 groups separate cleanly with no overlap at all, either you have found something extraordinary or you have made a mistake, and second one is much more likely. Let's run ourselves to have the conditions ready. Descriptives first. Let's go to descriptive. Okay, when it comes to statistics, we're usually looking at two general topics to discuss: descriptive statistics, and that comes with some explanations. Then we have other parts. So, descriptive statistics first. Every time before doing any test, impute 3 numbers: the mean, the median, the standard deviation, and the standard error. The mean says where the group sits, the standard deviation says how spread out the individual trials are, and the standard error says how well you have pinned down the mean itself. Those last 2 get confused constantly, so standard deviation is a fact about your data, and it does not shrink when you collect more. Standard error, on the other hand, is a fact about your estimate, and it does shrink if you get more samples. Reporting one when you meant the other actually makes your error bars wrong by a factor of a square root of your sample size. That's a lot, and actually people will notice. We got a little look at scipy. We import the stats library from scipy, which has all the statistical measurements, parameters that we want to deal with, plus the statistical tests, the standard statistical tests that we're going to deal with. This is once again beauty of Python from a well-maintained repository, from a well-maintained actually package that is named scipy. Just what we do is just import stats from scipy, which of course stands for statistical tests. So one small technical thing here, that DDOF equals one of the 3 1 in 3 tells NumPy. You are estimating a population from sample, which almost always are. But this is what we usually do. You can't, or maybe it's just too hard or too expensive to study the whole population. So you go on and basically sample, which we always do. Leave it out, and you your standard deviation comes back slightly too small. It's a small bias and it is easy to avoid. So let's actually see what DDOF here is. Okay, that's why we use this. Okay, so this is how we create a describe function. Basically, we get, these are all from basically from scipy. All it has to do with is that it computes the mean, the standard deviation, and the square root that we have here. So we have the standard error and etc. to have a description of what we want. And here we just print it. We have the number of samples which we usually have, the mean, the standard error, the standard deviation, and the basically what we've been calling the standard error. And there's a difference in means that we can observe here, which we're going to discuss. T-test. Stats come with every type of statistical test that you want, either dependent or independent, either parametric or non-parametric, so all of them included. And independent, what we're going to do, because we have considered like two conditions, right? So an independent test basically like samples t-test compares independent sample t-test compares two groups of separate observations. Separate matters because we are not measuring one group in two different stages. We have two independent groups of study, so the separate matters. These are different trials, not same trials measured twice. If there were the same participants under two conditions, of course, then you would want a paired t-test instead. Using the wrong one is common. Consequential mistakes come with like non-negotiably wrong answers that we're looking at. Okay. So what a t-test returns back to us is a p-value and t-statistic. Using stats.ttest underline int, which stands for independent, and when you give it two of the study groups you have, basically what it does is compute the p-value and the t-statistics from that and just puts it into these two variables that we have just named p_value and t_test. That's how we do it. Okay, then the t, and then it reports back the values. We have a p-value of 0.01130, and there's the t-statistics, which what they do. Let's discuss that. What the p-value actually says is that, like, I have written this here, so you can actually take a look after, or even like without watching the video, so you can actually have an idea of what is going to, what is the purpose of this cell of codes here, and what's the logic. So just read this carefully if you do, because most people carry a wrong version of it, like for years of their career in research. The p-value is the probability of seeing a difference at least this large, and we define based on literature that what is that's large. If two conditions were truly identical, then that's it. That is the entire statement. It is not the probability that your hypothesis is true or not. It is not the probability that the result is fluke. And it says nothing whatsoever about how big the effect is that you're studying. The last one actually worth dwelling more, the effect. A tiny meaningless difference will produce a very small p-value if you collect enough data. That is not the universe telling you something important. That is you telling the new universe that you have had a big budget to actually just increase your sample size. So that's the basics on p-value reporting and t. You have to be careful how you interpret them as a researcher. And more on the last one, the effect size. Even though a very large sample size can produce a meaningful p-value, a very small one, that does not tell if that effect is large. So what we do is that which is why you report the effect size next to it after you actually report your t-test results. Cohen's d expresses the difference in units of the pooled standard deviation. There are much more explanation on these, the equations, where do they come from, how to apply them, like mathematically. you can check out the internet, like there are many resources for that, but our purpose is not that. We're just going to test case everything that we learn, so we see how they happen and what they do. So basically, Cohen's expresses the difference in units of pooled standard deviation, which we have here, and you can actually compute it using like this simple equation here. And what you do is that this that's happening here. It does not care about your sample size at all, and that's actually beautiful, depending on what sample size you're running on. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so based on literature and based on experience, we have this template to look at. There's a rough convention to it. The rough convention is that 0.2 is a small effect size, 0.5 is medium, and 0.8 is large. And depending on what is your Cohen's the value, like we have the one that we have computed here, which is 0.66, basically it lands around these two values, between medium to large. The thing is that actually causes a problem actually. Okay, now the uncomfortable part, and it is not really about maths. It's if you run 20 comparisons and report one that came out at 0.04, you have found noise. The p-value you print is meaningless because the calculation assumes you have asked one question, you asked 20. Okay, be careful. These are the traps that researchers, specifically the ones that are actually starting out in the field, actually fall into. You better know it before you actually submit your paper, so the embarrassment is actually to yourself and not, publicly announced by two reviewers and your name. Of course, the reviewers don't see your name, but you know you have made the mistake. So, that being said, you're rarely on this on purpose. It happens by drift. You try one time window, then a slightly different one, and go on. So you exclude two participants who look odd, imagining them as outliers. You try the other electrode cluster instead. Like every choice is defensible on its own, and collectively you have searched a very large space and reported the best thing. You found it. The fix is not complicated. Decide what you are testing before you look. Correct for multiple comparisons. This is very important actually. Correct for if you've been doing like multiple comparisons, you have to do multiple comparison connections. All these have their own statistical tests, all available in scipy stats. So it's not like that you're going to have to write the equation down or create a function or something. You just have to know what you're doing conceptually and then use the right tool for it. And if the analysis was exploratory, so say so plainly in the paper in those words. Exploratory work is valuable. Exploratory work described as confirmatory is how a literature actually fills up with things that will not replicate. Waste more time and funding. And on that, a widely cited analysis in 2013 estimated that median statistical power in neuroscience studies was somewhere around 20%. Which means that the typical study, if the effect size is real, misses it 4 times out of 5. Underpowered studies do not just fail to find things, they also inflate the effects they do find, because only the large fluctuations get past the threshold. So the most useful statistical decision you make usually happens before data collection, when you decide how many participants to run. Now let's see what we're actually dealing with, the plotting part. Put the post-test result on the plot next to the data it came from. That's the purpose that this cell of code actually is carrying. This time we're going with violin plots. There was a task to do it on, a little task for you to do on previous sessions, like last section. You actually go to draw this on your own. And now look at how much of those two violins overlap. Okay. Despite a significant result, the p-value we reported, remember, let's see, this is under 0.05. Okay, despite a significant result, and a decent effect size. The effect size is very large too. Look at it. As I stated before, it lands between medium and high effect size. So keep that picture. Every time you read significantly different in an abstract, that is roughly what it looks like underneath. That's the purpose that we actually plot things to see if how much they overlap. Of course, there are mathematical equations to this, but let's actually observe that's how learning happens, like usually. And so this is roughly what it looks like underneath. Significant does not mean separate. It means the difference is bigger than you would comfortably expect from noise. Okay, very important points today. Yeah, I'm learning. Noise. Now, let's wrap it up. So, we do descriptives before we test anything. And by descriptives, what we mean is that the big three that we discussed. The mean, the standard deviation, and the standard error. And next to that, after we take the tests, effect size, next to every p-value reported. Decide your analysis in advance. Say so when you did not in your methods section. The exercise at the bottom, right here, is the best demonstration in this course. Set the trial count to 10 and rerun, and the means barely move and the p-value falls apart completely. Then set it to 200 and watch it become overwhelming. Nothing about the underlying effect changed, only your ability to detect it. Once you have watched that happens a few times, you will never read a p-value the same way again. Next session, we change subjects completely. Brain regions do not work alone. So we start treating them as networks, correlation matrices, graphs, hubs, and mathematics that let you say something about the shape of the brain rather than the activity of one piece of it. Notebooks and data are available in the first comment freely for you to just go on and test your curiosity. Please enjoy and see you on the next session.